Tell me a little bit about the opportunities and the income that ferry pilots can earn, and like what is the lifestyle? Say that you are earning somewhere more, the same, or less than a first officer at a regional. Roughly, what would the client pay for that? Nathan, thank you so much for making some time to come and share your story of ferry piloting with myself and the Fly with Trent community. It's something that I don't personally know a lot about. I've read a little bit here and there. And so when I ran across your post, I thought, hey, this is a guy I want to get in touch with. I think that this might be an interesting career for a few people, or maybe more than a few people. I'm really not sure, but let's let the content speak for itself. So let's start off with this. How long have you been a ferry pilot, and why did you choose this particular career path versus all of the other things you could do in a cockpit?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, so I'm in a professional ferry pilot now for a little over 2 years. My company, Ferry Direct Aviation, here located out of Southwest Florida, really was formed out of an accident. I was trying to get a job as a low time pilot at this time, doing some pipeline patrol out in Texas, and I had applied for the job. And at the time, I had about 700, 800 hours total time, but the majority of that time were in Piper Arrows. And I think I only had about 150 hours or so in like a 172. And the company said I didn't have enough 172 time to come fly pipeline patrol. So I was a little butthurt on that. So I was out to dinner and I ran into this guy that had a little airplane emblem on his shirt. And we got to talking, and it turned out that he was a broker. He was a local broker here in Fort Myers. And True North Aviation is the company. And he was telling me that he had a fully restored 210 that needed to go out to California. And if I, had the experience to do it. And at that moment, of course, you say yes, right? What an opportunity. I'd never flown anything that fast, that big, or that far before. But, the old saying is you fake it till you make it, right? So you say yes.
Hmm.
And so over the next couple weeks, we got to talking, and the client got involved. And the client said, "Hey, you know what? I don't feel comfortable just letting anybody low time fly in it. Let's uh, let's find somebody that's a company, like an actual company." So that broker got back to me and said, Nathan, I move a lot of these a year. It probably behoove you maybe to start an LLC and start a company doing this. And right there, the company was formed, and that was my first. That was my first ferry flight. So from Arcadia, Florida, out to Palm Spring, California, in a 210.
Cool.
Yeah,
Takeaway number one, guys, and I talked about this in my video that I produced just recently. Networking.
networking,
So let's not beat
absolutely.
that horse to death. But if you're not networking on a regular basis, you are um, holding your career back, I guess is one way of describing it.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about so many people when they get into aviation, they think about like the airlines are the only way to go, or
Hmm.
maybe that's not the right way to phrase it, but maybe they
It's
don't
the
consider other
pinnacle.
things. So tell me a little bit about the opportunities and the income that ferry pilots can earn, and like what does the lifestyle look like?
Right. Well, I can tell you for myself, and we'll talk a little bit more. I think there's more or less two types of ferry pilots, right? The way I look at it, there's more domestic, and then there's international ferry pilots, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And I would say for myself, 2 years in the business, the very first year was hard. We didn't make a whole lot of money. It was more about getting that time in all the aircraft types, and just really putting your name out. And like you said, networking, right? Putting in your
Hmm.
dues in the industry. And I would say my second year, this is second year plus now, generating the company's generating, mid to high six figures. We're moving, I would say, probably on average of 40 planes a year now. So we have
Wow.
volume, like we're moving
Yeah.
volume.
So you have pilots that work for you? You're not the one doing all the
I'm
flights,
not the
or how
one
does it?
doing all of them. No. So what we
Okay,
do is, I have a great list of pilots, and the crew that I built on this last flight, we have Nick Messina out of Raleigh, North Carolina, Kyle Songgrass out of Tampa, Andrew LaBelle out of Cleveland, Matt Canning out of New Jersey, and Kyle Molander out of Fort Lauderdale area. This is my primary crew right there. So if I'm not the one flying it, the rest of those gentlemen right there are picking up my slack. And then of
okay.
course we 1099, or we'll bring in some contract pilots for like the real specific things. If we're moving, uh, you know, uh, seaplanes and things of the such like that, or air tractors or something of the sort, we'll bring those guys in.
So so bottom line for you as the owner, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want
Sure.
to, but would you say that you are earning somewhere more, the same, or less than a first officer at a regional?
I would say that I'm earning less. I would say I'm learning less. I think that if the business was producing mid six figures, I'm probably taking 55, 60 grand of that, maybe a little bit half of that, as far as my
Right?
salary. But again, you got to look at it this way too. I'm 2 years into this business,
Yeah,
right?
you're building
So
something.
we're still building it. And, this last recent ferry that we just had an amazing opportunity to be part of really has opened up the doors. And we're starting to put things in motion to start going international. And I think like once we start transitioning more from the domestic North American routes and we start moving more international, I would honestly say that would be comparable to first officer. Um, you know there's some of the great ferry pilots that are out there right now. There's Sarah over at Full Throttle. Obviously everybody knows Carrie McCauley, the author of The Ferry Pilot. You got David Plange over there in I believe England with Alpha 2 Bravo. Sam Rutherford and Eric Sampson are all pretty big names in oceanic ferry piloting. And they inspire me to be a lot like them. That's where I want to bring on my company is more to that international level. I think in doing that, I think risk is going to be a lot higher, but I also think
Mhm.
the reward is going to be there as well, and I think it would be worth it. But it takes perseverance, and it's going to take a lot of education, and then opportunity. You're going to have to form those opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So what is it, let's say a client wants to ferry a Cirrus
sure.
across the pond.
Uh-huh.
Roughly, what would the client pay for that?
Roughly, I think right now the going rate, if it's just simply going, I don't know, U.S. over there, we're probably looking somewhere between 11 and 16 grand, just depending. I
Okay.
think that's about the range, and I know that there's a big range there, but it all depends on weather, fees, and exactly where it's going into Europe.
Yep,
Sure.
fair enough. So when you hear people saying that ferry piloting is only for low time pilots, obviously those names that you just rattled off are not low time
They're
pilots. So
not
what's
low
your
time
reaction?
pilots.
Yeah, no,
Exactly.
what's your reaction to that? Can low time pilots do this? But it's not only for low time
Well,
pilots.
I would be a hypocrite if I didn't say low time pilots could do it because I was that low time pilot. I think that ferry flying is a really good alternative if you don't want to go the CFI route.
Hmm.
With that being said, okay, should a 300 total time pilot try to take a plane over the pond? Well, number one, the insurance company is never going to let you do that. Should a 300 total time pilot be flying 2,000 miles across the country on his first one? Probably not very wise. But can
Yeah,
you start in your local area and you start doing 500 nautical mile flights in a 172, 182, and start building your repertoire to get better? Absolutely, you can. But when we're talking about professional ferry pilots, right, especially in the names that I just mentioned, we have thousands of hours in a cockpit. We spend countless hours researching the flights, mitigating the risks that are involved. The planning's a lot. This last flight that we just did to Iqaluit, Canada, back down to Lakeland, Florida, I bet my team and I bet we had 5 days of planning. We have 5 days of planning involved. It's not easy. It's not something that you can just go down and say, well, I'm going to go fly an airplane 1,500 miles across the country, because a lot of the times the airplanes aren't in the best shape that they should be in, right? A lot of them
Yeah.
are hangar queens or ramp queens or whatever you want to say.
So
So,
so let's dive into that trip
sure.
a little bit more.
Yeah.
So the point of origination was where?
It was, I'm going to say it wrong, but Iqaluit, Canada. That's going to be
So
Charlie
way up
Yankee,
north.
way up north. Charlie Yankee Foxtrot Bravo would be the identifier, and going back to Lakeland, Florida.
Okay.
And the story behind that is, there was a company, and I won't say any names now, but there was a company that was hired, I believe, out of Austria, on the behalf of the Turkish Airlines Flight Academy in Turkey. And they brought over some pilots to move 11 aircraft out of the Cessna factory, and I guess their plan was to fly them back to Turkey. And whatever happened, I wasn't there. The last man got stuck in some bad weather, and it seems like maybe ran out of fuel trying to get into Iqaluit, and one aircraft was lost. Thank goodness he survived. But upon that, obviously, that contract was canceled, and we had 10 brand new 172s stuck up there in Canada, and they need to be rescued. And that's where my company came in for the rescue mission. So we built a team of guys I told you, and we had about 4 or 5 days in planning, and
Mhm.
we executed them. It took about 27 hours per trip. So we did 2 trips. We moved 6 the first time, and then we went back and picked up 4 more. So it took us 11 days in total to get all of them down here into Florida safely. And then Brad Neal out of Lakeland, Florida, has been in business for 30 something years. So take the wings off and container them and ship them over to Turkey. And that was the
Got it.
mission.
And how did you end up being the recipient of that contract after the plane was lost? Was that, again, more networking
That
that
is
led you into that
110%
opportunity?
networking. I cannot stress that enough. So, one of my biggest clients is Airmart out of Lexington, Kentucky. Absolutely fantastic company to work for. I've been moving their planes now for a year or so, and we do quite a bit of business with them. And the broker that was dealing the deal with the Turkish Airlines reached out to um, Airmart, and Airmart, you know, said that my company would be able to handle it, and that's
Yep.
exactly how we got brought in. Hmm.
Okay. And help me a little understand too the planning aspect. So you've got this big trip. What let's not spend 45 minutes talking about
Sure,
planning,
sure.
but let's spend a couple of minutes. Like, what are some of the things that go into planning a safe ferry trip?
Sure, absolutely. Well, the first thing is that we want to know what kind of equipment we're dealing with. What is the history of the aircraft? What kind of condition they're in. So we're going to have team members looking at maintenance records. We're going to be looking at paperwork, making sure that everything's legal and it's good to go, and what kind of condition those airplanes in. The next, we'll go into the planning phase, and that's just where are they at and where are they going. What kind
Mhm.
of risk are we going to have associated with that? What kind of resources are we going to need? For example, a lot of people don't know this, but in Canada, there's a lot of places that don't have fuel pumps. So you manually have to fuel the aircraft out of 55-gallon drums. So you have to have a pump, and you have to have the hosing, and you have to be able to do it that way. So a lot of that logistic research has to go into that. And then ultimately, we just have to make sure we have enough fuel to get there. Do we have maintenance? If something would go down, do we have maintenance? Do we have alternates? And we want 3 plans. Like, one of the things that I always tell my guys is, hey, have 3 plans, and we need 2 of the 3 to work. If we
Mhm.
don't have 2 of the 3 plans to work, then we probably need to revise and look at what we're doing. That way,
Mhm.
we always have an exit strategy, and we always have a plan for contingencies.
And I assume all your guys are instrument rated.
Everyone is instrument rated. All my guys are CFIs, CFIIs.
Yeah.
I'm the only one
Okay.
that's not.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So how do you deal so there's a lot of different kinds of planes in the world. So there's a lot of different types of clients. There's a lot of opportunities. How do you deal with it when someone says, "Hey, I need you to move my insert name and model of aircraft here," and you've never flown that plane before?
Now this is the great question. So there's There's the right way and then there's the wrong way, right? Sometimes it's just full send. You get as much information about the airplane as you can. You read POHs, you find the limitations, you go and you speak to flight instructors or people who have experience in that aircraft, right? As long as it's not going to be an insurance issue, right? So some of our clients just self-insure, they're not part of an insurance, and you got
Hmm.
to weigh out the risk, and you fly. Like for example, back in the day, I never flown a Mooney, didn't have an opportunity to go get Mooney time. Client was fine with it. I went and flew a Mooney. I had 5 hours to figure out how to land it. It was not a problem, right? But when we're talking about professionally moving aircraft, most of the insurance companies are going to require at least 25 to 50 hours in type. Hence why my team is built with a bunch of flight instructors. They all come
Yeah.
from various backgrounds, so if it's one of those unique aircraft, one of my guys are going to be able to have the time in there to give some instruction. And that's really the only thing you can do.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
have to have the time in the platform.
What are some of the mistakes that new or inexperienced ferry pilots make? And you can speak from personal experience or
Yeah.
stuff you've seen. I don't really care.
So one of the things that I seen early on is I would hire some lower time pilots, and they would cross the Rockies, and they would get that very first taste of mountain wave, and I would get a phone call, and they would say, "I don't think I can move this airplane the rest of the way. I got beat up pretty bad." Understanding of weather and weather patterns, that's another really big thing. Had some lower time pilots get stuck in some pretty nasty weather.
Hmm.
Just might not have that. And then finally, I really think it's just a matter of being able to plan and have the knowledge of knowing how to get out of trouble. We all can get in trouble, but the experience, the hours of building time, what that teaches you is how to get out of trouble and how to stay out of trouble, right?
Hmm.
I think, what do they say when it comes to risk management? If you don't know you're in trouble, if you're ignorant, to not knowing that there's, a level of danger, how are you supposed to mitigate that risk? So
Yeah.
that's where the flight time and the experience comes in, and that goes back to, can a low time pilot do the job? Sure, but are they going to be as proficient? Are they going to be as safe as somebody with, say around 800, 1,000 to 1,500 hours?
Hmm.
And I think that's the difference.
So this question might be tricky for you to answer because you've been a ferry pilot for such only 2 years.
Hmm.
What the question is, how does ferry piloting fare in the various ups and downs of the economic cycle? So I'm guessing maybe you've talked to other ferry pilots,
Sure.
probably talked to quite a number of them who've maybe been doing this for a long time. Like, really, how the root of the question is simple.
Mhm.
How stable of a career path is this versus, say, going and being a first officer at a regional or even at a major?
Right. I think that you're always going to have more stability, going to a regional or, a major airline or 135 operation. I just think that's just true. Remember, we talked about building relationships and we talked about word of mouth and getting your name out there. Some of these, big name ferry pilots, I mean, they're incredibly stable. Their name echoes through the entire business. I see Mr. Eric Sampson moving airplanes back and forth across the pond at least two, three, 4 times a month. I swear that's what it seems to be anyway. So I would
Hmm.
say if you looked in their position, I would say it would be incredibly stable. For the new kid on the block, for me, I think it's been stable this last year. I think we're seeing a nice uptrend. But again, with the economy here in the United States, I think that it's going to be shaky for a little bit. I
Hmm.
think it's going to be shaky underneath this economy. But once things pan out, I think that things will improve
Okay.
for me, from us.
And so my final question is for the folks who are still with us and listening and thinking, "Hey man, I kind of might like to be a ferry pilot,"
Right.
whether they want to work for someone like you or they want to start their own gig. What's some of your advice on getting the career
Right.
kind of off the ground, so to speak?
I think the very first thing that that we need to say is you got to build those relationships, networking, networking, networking. I think number two, you have to take the risk. You don't need to go work
Hmm.
for somebody. Go start you an LLC, write a business plan, go speak to some brokers that are in your local area. Tell them that you'll ferry your airplane. right? Start small, baby steps, and start working it,
Hmm.
getting bigger and bigger. Um, as you do that and you climb the little bit ladder, you can take more risk and take more risks, fly faster and bigger airplanes. You know, I
Hmm.
I did this out of accident. This was something that fell in my lap. I had no intention to ever become a ferry pilot. In fact, I wanted to go fly aeromedical because in my last career I was a paramedic, and I wanted to get into
Hmm.
aeromedical, and this just happened to fall in my lap, and I happen to be pretty good at it, so I'm going to run at it. So that's what I would say. I would say go and take the risk, start your own company, do your own thing, just be safe about it.
So then I'll add on one more question. Let's suppose that someone decides to do that and they get a gig and they're like, hey, man, I need you to ferry this plane 500 miles. They
Hmm.
have no idea what to charge. What's
Right.
sort of the going rate for a domestic 500-mile trip in say a Cessna or,
Cessna
some,
172. So I
yeah,
can
sure.
speak. So I can speak for my company. Is generally single engine planes are $500 a day plus expenses is pretty much the going rate, kind of the industry standard. Twins start somewhere between 650, 750, just depending on what type of twin that would be. And then you got your specialty aircraft. And your special aircraft can just be like anything turbines or jets, and those are really contracted out by the day rate.
Yeah.
When you go and you speak to the pilot, like, hey, what kind of day rate are you expecting? They'll shoot you a number, and if it's reasonable, they generally get what they ask for because they put the dues in to get that experience to fly that airplane.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right, Nathan, for the folks who might want to be able to get in touch with you,
sure.
either to talk about being a pilot or maybe someone is listening and they need a plane moved, what's your company URL?
All right, so it's Ferry DCT at .com. And then email, you can get me at ferrydct@gmail.com. And that's Ferry Direct Aviation.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much
Thank you
for
so much
coming
for having
on
me.
and sharing your experience in the ferry pilot world. Folks, if you have a question for Nathan, please make sure you leave it down in the comments. Nathan, when the video
Absolutely.
is live, I'll make sure that you're aware of it so you can keep an eye on those
Wonderful.
comments and hopefully
Yeah.
we'll help a few people out.
Absolutely. And I'm always here for questions too. So feel free to email me as well if you have questions or you want to get into the business. I'll definitely take the time to speak with you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much.
You too. Bye bye.